Okay, my name is Fabiola de la Cueva. You can call me Fab, as in fabulous and modest. Emphasis on the modest part. I have been really hard working at that, getting modest. It's very well. Anyway, the topic of this presentation is kind of long, how to polish your software and development process to wow you. And apparently I wow you all because you're here. So, like I said, my name is Fabiola. I own Delacorp. I ran out of space with the icons here. I'm certified LabVIEW architect, certified professional instructor, LabVIEW champion, and I recently finally became officially an Alliance member. I had been working with the sales team, local sales team for a while, and I never really saw the need to become an official LabVIEW consultant. But if you do this for a living, I recommend you go and talk to your sales guy. There are really good opportunities there. So, first thing I'm going to do is try to figure out why PowerPoint is not advancing this slide. There we go. I hate when people read to me during a presentation, but I'm going to read to you. Not the entire slides, just the first two. Each moment has the potential to increase a user's confidence or destroy distrust in a product or a company. And each one is an important piece of the whole experience. Why? Because the task a person is attempting to complete at any given moment is the most important task to that person at that moment. So, it is our job to make sure nothing goes wrong, to make sure that moment is enjoyable and productive and helps our user feel smart. That one is the hardest one. Not because our users are not smart, it's just, how many of you develop applications that are not for scientists and engineers? Okay, there's a lot of people there. So there are a lot of things that we are, as engineers, are willing to forgive on an application. Example is, I go to the file browser, try to look for a file, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not ready, and then just click cancel, and error, user cancel operation. How many of you are familiar with that error? Right? That's no problem with engineers. Most of the scientists are okay with it. But if you are working, like I've done applications for a hospital, for example, the therapists do not like that error at all. They feel like, now I'm going to lose all my data, the application doesn't work, I need to restart it. You lose confidence. So you have to remember those little things. So why should you care? We know how we feel as users, right? We are using LabVIEW, which is a development application environment that was developed by National Instruments. We are users. Things that make us upset are probably similar to the things that are going to make upset our customers. So let's give a better experience to our users. So who are our users? As software developers, you actually have two types of users. You're going to have the actual application end user, the person that is actually going to install the executable and interact with your application. And you also have, if you're working on a team, you're going to have developers that have to use the libraries, the APIs, the tools and processes chosen or created by you or by other members on your team. We tend to either focus on this guy or the guy above. You have to remember both. And sometimes the guy down here, if you're a single woman shop, single man shop, that person might be you. I like to say, I read this sometime in Lava, you need to remember that you're programming for a psychopath that knows where you live. Now, that psychopath might be yourself. You're a deeper programmer today than you were a week ago before you learned all these new things at MIT. So something that seems very clever and important at 3 in the morning 2 weeks ago might not be so clear 2 weeks later. So even if you're a single person working on a project, remember that you're also working for yourself. Leave breadcrumbs, notes, information for you. Okay, user experience. The definition is a person's perception and responses that result from the use or anticipation of using a product, a system, or a service. This is actually an official definition because users are humans. Remember that. Developer experience. Again, this is one that we forget. And it's the same thing. It's the developer's perceptions and responses that result from the use or anticipation use of a library, tool, platform, API. For me, just knowing that I get to work every day on LabVIEW, that gives me joy. I actually enjoy working with it. Yeah, there's a little things here and there. For the most part, I do. Developers are humans too. Okay? So there's 3 types of professional LabVIEW software. There's a standalone application. What do I mean by standalone application? What was that? It's a build executable. Yes. There's also a LabVIEW add-on. That could be a palette, it could be a driver, it could be a VI library, it could be a toolkit. It could also be a utility. And there's also professional applications that run directly on the IDE. This happens a lot on test, where a big company buys site license of LabVIEW, and they never see the need of actually building an executable. We also need to think about those users. So here are the facts, 5 little things. Users are going to judge an application by its cover every time. The application needs to know the user. Please translate geek speak to English. We're going to talk about the building blocks. And finally, every developer needs a time machine. Okay? So at the end of the presentation, you're going to know how to build your own time machine. All right, so first I am going to start doing a demo of an application that I did for a customer. He authorized me to show this demo here. Keynote, or Jack's presentation this morning, this is an example of the page that we use to download the release application for the user. It has all the features and bug fixes, and all those blue things are links to cases in Jira or Fogbox that say how we actually solve the issue. There's also information for them on how to contact support, what version they're actually downloading. One of the things we did for this particular customer is we had, the security warning we normally get, but it actually said certified or verified publisher. So we actually pay money to get that. This means that you don't get the orange, red, you downloaded something from the internet, are you sure you want to install it? This is the professional experience a user gets. They get their logo, they get the end user agreement. We also were able to add password. So they have the password for the website, and they also have to install enter a password when they install. You see that it's telling me here everything that's getting installed, an Ibiza, runtime engine, but they never really see nothing in your face that says this was made with LabVIEW. This is not so important for other type of customers, but for customers that are doing, like in this case, an end user application that's going to be distributed around the world, they wanted to be more subdued. What was the method you did the application with? That's a splash screen. It includes the version, the name of the application, the logo, and also some information on the lower right, just telling the user what is it that you're trying to do. One of the things that I said is that you need to translate geek to English or user English. The user doesn't care about what port you're connecting to. They care about what device you're connecting to. So instead of using the word COM, everywhere we use Chrome ID 1100, which is the part number. What I'm showing there is that we are dragging the tabs off so you can send them into different monitor. Here's what I was telling you about, that this doesn't really, it says COM8, but really the information that you have there is what's the name of the device. Okay, and then we're performing a little scan. For most of the application, you feel like it is a LabVIEW. It's a Windows application. There are little telltales like the LEDs or the graph that tell you that you're not really, that you are using a LabVIEW. But for the most part, we try to stay away from showing that it was LabVIEW. All right, so there you have a nice flippy book where you go between one tab and the other, and you can show what's going on. You can send it to another monitor. Really nice, some GUI stuff there. You can close the tabs as if you were in a browser. And then finally, the messages for the user are not pop-ups or dialogues. I hate dialog boxes. Dialog boxes should be only for, A, the plant is about to burn down. Are you sure you want to continue? Right? Nothing else. Okay, about the application knowing the user. You have there a way of configuring your application. And one of the things that we did for them was, instead of using the regular right-click menu that you get on the palettes for a graph, we provided a smaller version of that palette. The reason for that is there was no way to eliminate all the other stuff I didn't want the user to get into, like anti-aliasing, bar plots, etc. So we reduced it to only a few options. I tend not to give the user an option to change the background. However, there are colorblind people out there, and unfortunately there's not the same type of color blindness for everyone. So it's better to let someone choose what colors they're going to use for a graph if they're going to be interacting with that graph always. So in this case, the user can customize their own user experience with this application without having to impose it in everyone else's, right? Will be saved only on their profile. And then finally, to stop the application, there was not a stop button. You actually just closed the window. This particular customer also wanted a driver and let other people be able to do their own version of the application. So we had to develop a palette with all the different information for each one of the functions. So you have all the functions there. There's documentation and how they can be used, and there's, of course, an example palette. I'm going to show you just a quick example there in performance scan. It is kind of a busy example. We're still working on cleaning it up, but the important thing to see is that it has instructions on how to run the example, and then it has a step-by-step descriptions of what's happening on the block diagram. Once we get to the block diagram, you'll see that we have an event structure there, and we're actually showing the user how to register for events. Now, on the team I was working with, there was a lot of debate, should we expose this? And we came to the conclusion that event structures are now part of LabVIEW base, so there's no excuse why not to show people how to use them correctly. So if I can do my little grain of salt here, to help people figure out how to do it, we're going to do it. All right. So, if you saw, I'm going to be touching most of the characteristics that we just saw. So the first thing was, users judge an application by its cover. Make your application look like it belongs in Windows. Or if you're using Macintosh, that it belongs in Macintosh. How do you do that? System controls, yes. Use system controls. Now, system controls do not have that nice graph I showed you. And that graph showed like it looked like it belonged in Windows. So where did I get the graph from? What was that?
Missing system controls.
There's an additional system control. So, who here uses VI Package Manager? Okay, people, it ships with 2013. So for all those of you that are not using it, it's free. You can do packages free. It comes on your CD. I really recommend you start using it. So if you go in VI Package Manager and search for UI system, you can download the UI Control Suite system controls. Simon Hogbeat does. They're really cool. There's even a nice looking air out, air in poster. And the tab control was X-Tab by Sapphire. They were finalists for one of the Tool Network's awards. I really recommend using it. If anybody here was on my presentation last year here at NIW, I showed pretty much the same idea of unlocking windows and being able to have a list where you would take sub-panels in and out. And I did it from scratch. And I think it was a pretty good application, but these guys definitely went a lot farther. Like the fact that you can close the tabs, reorder the tabs, that's all already done for you. So if you already know how to use sub-panels, you're on the other end and you can have a really nice looking, and it's free. So, Tools Network, just go ni.com, LabVIEW Tools, search for X controls, and you'll find the X tab there from Sapphire. All right, Somebody told me, Fabiola, why did you use comic sensor on a PowerPoint presentation? Doesn't look professional. Well, I was really trying to drive a point that's kind of like a comic, although it was an actual customer. It was an early release that I did for the application that I will show you. The user said, double-click in setup.exe, launches the installer, following the prompts, everything seems to be fine, but then the application is not on the start menu. Reinstallation is required to run the application. I mean, I was laughing so hard when I heard that. I was like, but you should be able to go to C program file. Oh, wait a second. My end user is not an engineer or scientist, right? Why am I forcing him to know that they need to go to C program files? So, I try to put here things for every level of LabVIEW proficiency. This is the easiest thing to do. It takes probably 20 seconds to your build process. Go on your installer, go to the shortcuts, find out where in the start menu you want your shortcut to be added, click it. Easiest, 10 seconds. It makes a huge difference on the confidence from your user on your application. Believe it or not, if you don't have this, people are already, doesn't matter that you have all your checklists, that you have implemented every feature they requested. You don't do this, even though they didn't request it, they're not going to have confidence in your application. Now, if you really want to go for the ease of installation and go into a little bit more advanced use, use Firebird Labs Deploy. It makes the process of deploying a breeze. You saw it on the keynote demo yesterday. It is repeatable. You can do it. We have, for this particular customer, we have weekly releases. Sometimes the release goes late into the night. It's so nice to know that I just need to right-click, build and deploy, and it just works. And I don't have to worry about that. It looks professional. Customers love the one-stop version for every version. This particular customer has a quality assurance guide. He loves it because he has the links of all the features and bugs that we fixed, so he can click there, go to Jira, close it, one shot. So Firebird Labs has a little booth where the exercise things are on the expo floor, so you can go and see the demo there. So this is an example of the web page that I showed you earlier. So you could have the same thing. You can customize it, have your logo there, the application of the name of your application. You can enter a password. Okay, splash screens. How many of you guys put a splash screen on your applications? Oh, this is really good. More than half. That's very good. So there's two reasons to put a splash screen. One is, again, the perception. We're dealing with humans. We have to give them some eye candy. And then you just put the name of your application, you put the version, you put the logo. It's also important to have some sort of progress information in the bottom, because one of the things that happens with an application is they might call you and say, your application is hanging. It might be that it's busy doing something. So if it's busy doing something, show it. It can be just messages that show up and disappear. That will give you information. The other reason to do, and I'll tell you the other reason. So there's a really nice splash screen effect that Mark briefly, this is just the effect. It's not the splash screen functionality that I'm going to describe in a minute. But he does a really good job of having the splash screen fading in and out. If you have a small application, handful of VIs, this is a really good way of doing it, where the top level VI has the splash screen integrated. Just Google LabVIEW splash screen, and I think it's the first result that comes up. The other option is to make the splash screen your startup VI. In that case, the splash screen is not going to do a lot of stuff, right? The only thing the splash screen is going to be doing is loading other VIs on the background, starting to connect to devices. If you know that you need to have 5 instruments connected, and if they're not connected, your application is not going to work, why go through the whole trouble of loading everything else? Just tell the user, there's a problem, fix it, right? I'll wait here for you to fix it. The advantage of doing it is that a BI that doesn't do much, that is just loading, is going to load fast. Use BI server to dynamically load other BIs. This means that you can be selective. You can decide only which BIs you're going to be using. Which function do I use for this? Okay, no, you're already asleep. Load BI, there's another one. Call by reference. What's the other one? Run an asynchronous call. Yes, that's the other one. So those are the different versions that you can use. Show progress. Again, the show progress serves twofold. It serves for when you're connecting remotely to try to troubleshoot the problem the customer is having. You can recognize your messages that you're seeing on the screen. It could also show the user if they forgot to do something, like connect the device. You can also show system health, hardware connections, drivers and plugins. Again, if you don't have everything you need, just tell the user and say, okay, I'll wait here. Another example of a splash screen comes on LabVIEW 2012. I haven't had a chance to check 2013. On the feedback evaporative cooler that's done with Actor Framework, actually has a splash screen. You don't need to be using Actor Framework to understand how that splash screen is working. But it suffices to say that you will see how they build the specification for it. The splash screen is the startup BI. And you can see how it works. It still needs some work. It's really cool because it does have the progress LEDs, and it does tell you what is it trying to do. Some of the things that I would change is I wouldn't put the title of the window. But for the most part, it's really, really good. So look at that if you don't have a splash screen working right now. One of the things that I included on the splash screen on the demo that I showed you in the video was a version. If you are distributing an application for more than one user or more than one site, when they call you with a bug, there's going to be situations where you know that bug got fixed and you need to know what version they're using. So the old method of just telling them, well, go to the program files folder where the application is installed and hover just so it shows up what the version is, doesn't quite cut it. So there's a better way. And by the way, this is my little CLA. LabVIEW, if you've never visited LabVIEW, definitely go there. It's a lot of additional information. There's this example program, it's a snippet. Also, you can just Google file version info.lov. This is a BI that ships with LabVIEW. It's one of those that is hidden on BI Lead. You have to go dig it out, which means that NI doesn't completely support that you go use it, but I've been using it for a while and it works really well. It's going to provide you the file version, product name, internal name, company name, copyright, file description. Where is all that entered? And when you're doing the build specification for the executable, that's where. So whatever data you enter there is going to show up on that BI. One thing to check out is this BI only works on runtime system. So make sure that you do put it inside either a case structure or the conditional disable structure. So what if, I said earlier, what if your professional application actually just runs directly on the IDE and you're not building an executable? How do you show the version there? You can get the version from a build specification. You can have one using the LabVIEW project API. If you're using source code control, how many people are using source code control here? Okay, preaching to the choir. Everyone else, I'll get you later. You can also use libraries and classes, have a version to them. Every time you make changes, they automatically increase their version. And there are BIs to obtain the version number. And the last two that are not really so preferable, but they're options, is doing the version from a configuration file. I don't like that one because now your user can go and mess with the configuration file and put a different version in it. Or using a global BI, I don't like that one because you're going to forget to go change it. Especially when it's 1 a.m. and you have to send the new release because they needed it yesterday, you're going to forget. All right. A well-designed graphical user interface behaves as the user expects it to behave. The problem here is that most of the time they're not going to tell you how they expect it to behave. You have to guess it. One of the things that I try to do is I go and see how other applications do it. And like it or not, if you're developing for Windows, your users are using Microsoft Word, Excel, browsers, and they have certain set of expectations. I don't know if somebody noticed something that I did really wrong, and my team did really wrong on the demo that I did earlier on the video. Okay, I'll see. If like somebody points it out on video. But so years of Windows evolution have taught us that the X mark closes, stops, cancels an action. All right. So the users around the world, please do not disable it. Again, if you're a LabVIEW user, it's totally acceptable to have a stop button, right? But if you're doing applications for people that have never developed in LabVIEW, the stop button on the right, lower right corner is not intuitive. I said when I did the application for the hospital, the therapists were like, what is this stop button for? I think the reason is historical. Again, the event structure was not supported on LabVIEW base, so the examples could not show using the event structure. But the event structures are now in LabVIEW base, so really there's no excuse to be using that stop button to stop your application. The way you stop by closing the window is you enter an event that's called panel close. One thing that the panel close event has there is a question mark. This is a filter. This is a typical kid that goes, Mama, Mama, my brother's about to jump the window. Should I stop him? This is a filter. So LabVIEW is telling you, developer, the user is trying to close the window. Should I let them? If you don't discard it, LabVIEW is going to do what it normally does when you close the front panel. And that is abort. It's exactly the same thing as pressing the abort button on the toolbar, which I see a lot of faces going like that's bad, right? So it's a good measure to just do the panel close. So a user interface is well designed when the program behaves exactly how the user thought it would. Joel on Software has a blog. He hasn't posted in the last 3 or 4 years, but there's still some gems in there that I recommend you reading. So some of the pro tips I'm going to give you. Make all these little things that I show you, the closing the front panel, the splash screen, part of your top-level VI template. Some of the templates and the examples that you have out there already have them. The QMH template project that ships with LabVIEW, it started with LabVIEW 2012, has the panel close event. The JKI state machine has the panel close. It also has the set your cursor to BC or set your cursor BC, so you can interact with the user and tell them, I'm BC. The top level baseline, that's from Norm Kirchner, you can find it in LabVIEW. That one has a lot of more things that are really nice. That I encourage you to go explore it, like resetting the origin, stuff like that. One thing that I found with advanced users, and I saw this earlier with a colleague of mine, he had totally forgotten about the question mark on that event case. The reason, he always uses a JKSD machine. He doesn't have a need to remember how that works. It's already there. Every time he starts a top-level BI, he starts it with that. This particular customer didn't want to use that, so we had to remember how to do those things. But if you have your own project that you go back to over and over, it doesn't have to be these guys. It can be your own. Make sure you add those little things, and then you don't have to worry about them. They just automatically work. Any questions about the first part? No? Okay, the application needs to know the user. So this is another one of those bug reports. It actually happened. When the application is closed and restart, my settings are not preserved. Users should not have to serve the settings every time. So how do we accomplish this? I do it using configuration files. There's a debate whether you should be using XML or INI or just a regular text file. I use XML because it translates really nicely from XML to a cluster. And I am a LabVIEW developer. I'm very visual. It's easier for me to do the cluster first and then worry about the XML than the other way around. OpenG and MGI, more good ideas, have toolkits that make creating configuration files a lot easier. If you just Google LabVIEW managing configuration files, you're going to have a week worth of work to go find, select which one you prefer. I am going to tell you what I think are the things your configuration library should do. If the application does not find a configuration file, it should create one with the default values. The reason for this is ensures that you don't accidentally forget to include it in the installer. How many of you have forgotten to include some configuration files or something that are needed? Yeah. Like the project gets corrupted, you have to recreate your project, etc. You might forget it. It also protects you from the user with initiative. That's the user that goes, deletes the configuration file, or loves to go exploring what you put in his computer and starts editing the file and corrupting it. So this means that you can actually, when they call you and say the application doesn't work, and you ask them, what did you do? Nothing. You just tell them, delete the file, and automatically everything works. Right? And at the CLI Summit, we came up with other creative ideas, like having an extra key configuration file that actually sets the default values of the default configuration file, because you can get very complicated with this way. But if you keep it with these principal rules, I think you'll be on the other side. Now, this might seem that it's unrelated, but it actually comes because we're talking about configuration files. Pi is a constant. Number of seconds in a minute is a constant. Hopefully it will stay constant. Number of flux capacitors in the DeLorean is 1, but Doc might change his mind. And the same thing goes for the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity needed to power the DeLorean. How many of you have had customers that say, no, that setting is set in stone, it will never change? Over, somebody's dead body, whatever, and then next week after your release, they come back, can we make it 2 instead of 1? That should be easy, right? Anytime you're putting a constant on your block diagram, you should question yourself. Is this a constant or a variable constant? So, you should include all your variable constants in your configuration files if it's possible. If you have constants that are actually constants, they can stay on your block diagram, but please label them. I spent 20 minutes with a customer. Now I know every time I see 86400 that it is the number of seconds in a day. But those 20 minutes of my life I will never get back. And we went to the Google and started typing 86400, and Google, in all its wisdom, before I even finished typing, showed me that it was the seconds in a day. So, label your constants. It might seem obvious to you because you're immersed in doing the development at that moment in time. But 2 months from now, when the customer calls you, you're going to forget what you meant by 86400. Okay? It also doesn't help if the code looks like a spaghetti. But at least the labels might give you some pointers. So, pro tips. Use XX constant LVI to wrap variable constants. What I mean by that is there are some times that it's okay to have a constant on the configuration file, but there are other times that you want to be reinserted on the development process if you change that constant. An example of that would be you decided that you were going to have a cluster that had only 4 elements, right? And that's based on 4 inputs on your system. If the user decides to change that to 5, your user interface is not going to work. So if that constant changes, you need to be reinserted in the development. You need to recompile the application. So in that case, that constant should not be on a configuration file. In that case, what I say is put it on a VI. And I'm going to show in a minute what I mean by that. Create your own library to manage configuration files. Add this library to your template project. How many people have a template project? All right, they ship with 2012. I recommend you go check them out, especially if you do multiple projects. If you're always working on a single project, it might not be so useful. But if you are in a business like mine or integrator, create a template project and then just have all the tools you need there. If you create a package, now with using VI Package Manager, creating packages is free. The VIPC file, you need to have the professional version, but what it is a list of all the packages that are used by that application. So if you are using VIP and Pro, create a VIPC file. So this is what I meant by the constant VI. It's just a constant that has an output. Okay, so who's going to go, why don't you use a global? You have to go into the global, set value as default. You might forget it. The other thing too is this cannot be written to programmatically. The global VI, especially if you're going to work in a team of developers, you might think that your team is really well trained and they won't do it. If you have it there, they'll do it. Somebody will go and write to the global where you don't expect it to. So this is kind of like having a cheap global. The other advantage of having this is that you can add error in, error out if you need it. And you can do fancy stuff like, if this is a constant but it is variable because you're going to add the version to it, I could add the code that I showed you earlier, concatenate it in there, and now I just had to go modify the code in a single location. So the reason I use these little VIs instead of using constants is that I have a single place to go modify. I can right-click and find all the places where it's being used, right? And it makes it a lot faster to do little changes with variable constants. Any questions on the second part? No? Yes?
Just one comment about INI files, or especially if you use an INI file. Be careful if you use the default of application name.ini, because the LabVIEW installer overwrites that when you install a new version, and you'll undo all of their settings.
Oh yeah, that's true. You have to have, so I'm going to repeat, you have to keep the name of your application on if you're using INIs, otherwise the installer is going to override it and override whatever the user had. So one of the reasons why I said of using XML too, you reminded me another reason why I use them, is that I check if they're there. If they're not there, I create one with the default values. If it's not there, I just keep going. So that helps me with patches and new installers. I don't have to remember about being worried about overwriting their application, their settings. Okay, translate it to English. Use terminology that is familiar to the end user, right? This is a little example of, if you Google E-Times Understanding User Interface Design, they have a really nice article about translating it to speak, to English. If you go to iCasualties.org, it says, please select database, Iraq or Afghanistan. The user doesn't care if you're using a database, if you're using a table, if you're using a file in your computer. They care about the country, or in this case, war, theater, or something that is common to their language. In our case, if you're connecting to a Tektronix scope, the user doesn't care that it is GPIB, : whatever. They want to see Tektronix scope. An example of the demo I did, they want to see the part number, the serial number of the device they have. That's a language that is common to them. So I always say, when the sales guy asks me, well, what's your niche? I say, well, look, I am a LabVIEW expert, and I'm going to help the domain expert. I'm also going to be the translator, right? The domain, I'm going to talk to the domain expert and figure out what are the words that he's comfortable with, and try to insert those in my code. Mark Arnett, are you in the room? No? Okay. Mark helped me do this little code here. It parses the error message before displaying it. What it does, it removes the code chain. I was working with another developer, and he sends me a snapshot of an error that he's getting of a driver that I created. This was packaged, and it was buried like 20 hierarchies below. So the actual possible source of the error could not be seen, because the code chain was so big that you never got to it. And I told him, look, as a fellow developer, I hope you understand understand that this is useless to me. I cannot help you. So we have to actually go in the VI, create an indicator for the error, scroll down, and then, oh yeah, the error is this. So also the user, when you're doing a little string on the bottom to communicate with them, you don't have that much real space. And if you leave the code chain, it might help you as a developer, but it's going to scare the user. So if you can track your errors and just put a nice thing like, instead of Microsoft SQL exception, null value not accepted, just say, please go and put a name, right? Your name is empty. That's why I'm not able to proceed to the next step. And you can also use the configuration file to set these flags true or false. So you can say, okay, if I turn on debugging to true, I'm going to show the code chains because I need them as a developer. If I turn it to false, then I'm going to let the user just see the error source. There are a lot of errors in LabVIEW that seem that are cryptic, but the only reason they're cryptic is because they include the entire code chain. The user never reads that part. So, pro tips. Handle all your errors. The whole idea of wiring your error wires is not only because it looks pretty, it's not only for putting sequencing, it's also because it reminds you or forces you to think about handling them. Translate most common errors. If you're working with Visa, you're going to be coming across a timeout error a lot. So drop that error and put a message that makes sense to your user. It could be like, don't worry, everything is fine, we're going to try it again. Right? Look into using custom errors. This is something that one of the guys that I did the dry run with suggested. I don't use custom errors. How many here use custom errors? Numbers? Yeah, you're probably working like with thousands of VIs and you already have a spreadsheet that is like 5 pages long with all the errors, right? What I find is that I just, these might be sloppy, but I use error 42, generic error. And then I have a VI that handles errors, and I feed into it the source description of what the error was. Because normally the error happens, like I know exactly where the error is occurring, so that's the best place to put the description. It leads directly with the VI. When I am troubleshooting, I can see directly what was my intention. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
2013 has new functionality to handle all those custom errors.
Really? Cool. 2013 has a new functionality to handle all custom errors. I'm going to go check it out. See if finally I can go back and go to do things correctly. Do not display errors using pop-up dialogues. Really, that's very annoying. Especially at 3 in the morning. Instead, use a status string at the bottom of your GUI. My favorite error, by the way, is at 3 in the morning, you're troubleshooting something and it says, error occurred, call technical support. I am technical support. You're like, cool. Put a status string at the bottom of your GUI. That's very unintrusive, and you can do other telltales for your user, like right out the button that they're supposed to press now. So they're going to be trying to figure out why I cannot press. Oh, here's the information why I cannot press it. Leave pop-up dialogues for really things that are I really need to get your attention. You're about to delete the entire database of the whole content. Are you sure you want to go? That's definitely a dialog box. But you forgot to enter a name, that's not so big. Alternatively, you can log errors to 5. If you're going to do that, please cap the size. You really don't care about the errors that happened 3 months ago. You're not going to be able to help the user. They're going to be calling with an application, with a problem. You can tell them, send me these 5. Probably only need to figure out the last day of errors to be able to help them. Why do I say to cap the size? One of my jobs as an architect is to go help people, firefighter. And I had a customer that was doing OEM instruments. It was a mini computer. And they were having, after about a month or 2 months of the unit being deployed, customers started complaining about performance. Guess what the size of the error log message was, right? I love those types of projects, by the way. I come in, just look at certain things that I already know are telltales. Okay, the building blocks. the building block approach. Lego blocks. Okay, organize your project into sections. How many of you are using projects? Okay, you better be the entire group. If you're not using project files, unless you're working with a huge application and you have all these other problems that we know, but you have to be like CERN or something like that to be part of this problem. Use projects. Organize your project into sections. Make each section a project library or a LabVIEW class. If you're not into LabVIEW object-oriented programming, you can still organize your project using project libraries. Some people tell me, oh, I already tried using project libraries, and they were a nightmare because the library tells the VI, you are mine, and the VI has a setting that says, I belong to this library. So if you remove it from the library and try to add it to another library, then LabVIEW starts screaming bloody murder. You know, this VI, it's a bastard child. He thinks that he belongs to this library, but the library does not recognize it. You have to go. So people say, that's why I don't use it. Normally what I find is that the reason you run into those problems is because your libraries are not being cohesive enough. By cohesive, I mean they need to all be related together. So if you have a library that deals with beat banging, with byte manipulation, right? Don't put a PI there that opens a file, right? You're dealing with things. Put things that belong together. Then it becomes really nice because if somebody uses your library or you yourself, months from now when the psychopath comes back and you want to load the library, if you take one of those VIs and put it in your project, automatically the whole library comes in and now you remember all these nice tools that you have created. So my library for error handling, for example, has already that parsing for eliminating the code chain and other nice things that I do for the translating the messages. So I only need to include one of those in my projects and I get all of them. Each section should be able to run on its own. How many of you have called applications engineering department saying you have a problem and they tell you, can you isolate it to a reduce couple of VIs that you can send me so I can reproduce it? Right? Nobody has seen that? I try to do this because if you have a different section, it's not only because I'm going to call technical support, it's also because it's going to help me. I love working from home. So I just go to the customer side during deployment, and then after that they call me and they're like, you need to come. And I'm like, okay, let me connect remotely, let's see your application. Okay, I see the problem, let me try reproducing in a simulated mode here in the comfort of my home. I'm going to isolate the library and first see if the problem is on one of the components or is it the sequence flow of my application that's causing the problem. Okay? So if you make it a good practice to have your sections and be able to run the sections individually, it's going to help you. Add a test VI or an example VI for each section. This is not only to be done because you're doing a palette that you're going to be distributing to your user. This is to be done because it's going to help you. Create a little sandbox where you're showing yourself what your intention was on how your functions were going to be linking to each other. It will also show other developers what your intentions were. And you're going to remember yourself 2 months from now what your intentions were. The other advantage of using the libraries is that you can use a scope, make certain VIs private, VIs public, right? If you do that and you use VI Package Manager to create a package, you can make it where the installed code is password protected, and then all the private VIs disappear from the library. Your user doesn't see them, they only see the VIs you want them to touch. So the reason to have an test example code, I said it, is when bugs show on in your application, there is an isolated place to troubleshoot. New team members can see your intentions. You will remember your intentions. It also could be used for unit testing. Like once you have your sandbox working, you can extract that and convert it into unit tests. And we can, I can do a complete session about this. I use JKI, GI Tester. You can also use the unit test framework from LabVIEW. The nice thing about that is every time before I build the package, I run my unit testing, right? And it's not going to catch everything, but at least it's going to catch the typical things that I need. On the project that I did for this customer, we had two locations of documentation that needed to be updated. So anytime I change the XML format, the unit test is ran, and it reminds me the file on this location does not match this location. Identify reusable code. So if you have modules, if you're already working on individual cohesive sections of code, it makes it really easy to turn them into packages. And then you can password protect the installed package, and the private VIs are not visible. If you want tips on how to do this, and again, you don't have to do this because you're providing tool palettes to other people. This is because it will help you be a better developer and have a nice toolbox of VIs that you're going to be reusing in your applications. I'm going to plug in later session here from Becky and Eric, where they're going to be talking about legacy code and how VI can help them on that. It really makes it a lot easier for you to work on code if you're in a team to standardize within the team. So if you search for creating and managing reusable code in LabVIEW, in the LabVIEW Tools Network Developer Center, you can get it, or just Google it. You'll see all the list of things. It's a nice checklist that you can introduce into your code reviews. Because everybody here does code reviews, right? The best code review is the one that actually happens. Okay, logs need to be cohesive. Treat your reusable code as its own project. The difference here is that the deliverable is a VIP, a package, instead of an EXE. This could also be translated into package libraries. I don't use package libraries because I like my customers to call me because they want to call me, not because they need me. So I don't want them that when LabVIEW operates, they have to call me again, so I come in just to compile code. So that's why I use packages. Has its own repository. The install code has a prefix. You want to add the prefix so when you're opening the code and you realize that there's something that you need to fix, if you go open the source code and you don't have a prefix, the source code and the install package are going to have the same name, and LabVIEW is going to be mad. So just use a prefix. That will help you. It will also help your users and yourself identify if you're calling install code or source code. Do not wait until the end of the project to go back. You will never go back and rescue them. They're going to be casualties. You'll never have time. It's better to think about these things since the beginning of the project. Identify what's going to work for you. When I was doing the driver for this customer, and I found out that I was doing all these byte manipulation functions, I was like, I better put this in a separate library. This is going to be useful in other projects. So I started putting it in a library, and then midway through the project, we finally converted it into a package. So you will never have time. These are things, testing, unit testing, and example code and sandboxes. Those have to be done since the beginning. You'll never go back and do that. Build early and build often. Test early and test often. LabVIEW has spoiled us. We press that lovely white arrow and everything works. So months go by, and then the user says, I want an executable. And you start finding out all those little things that do not work the same in the IDE that they do on an executable, like paths and things like that. Okay, every developer needs a time machine. This is why you all stay. Okay, last year, this happened to me. I was working with a third vendor. He was doing motion control using C. I called him and I said, the new version introduced a bug. That is impossible. I never add bugs to my new releases. Can you tell me what changed? Nope, I changed what you asked me to change. Can you revert to the previous version so we can figure out if the previous version still works or if it's a hardware issue? No, I only keep current code. What method of source code control do you use? Why would I use source code control if I am a single developer? Good programming practices have nothing to do with marital status. Okay? So source code control and the path to happiness. You will be able to tell what changed from version to version. Even if you're a sloppy commenter, you at least can see which files change between commits. You will be able to go back to a previous version to test if the problem is with your code or if the problem is with hardware or if the problem is with the user. You will not lose your code due to an alien invasion that has targeted just your hard disk and makes it explode. I started there, provided you have a backup offsite. So source code control is not the solution to everything. Also, you have to commit often, and if you're working in a team environment. source code control is not a replacement for communication. Make sure you communicate with your team. So, just to summarize, users judge applications by its cover. The application needs to know the user. Please translate geek speak to user English. Always start thinking when you're doing your application on building blocks. And every developer needs a time machine. The building blocks is also, do not reinvent the wheel. There are really cool tools. I showed you the Sapphire XTab. I showed you Deploy. You don't have to do everything from scratch. So let's turn our adequate software into magnificent works of highly functional art. It is the little things, the icing on the cake that will get us there. To learn more, that already happened, but you can go back when you go through the slides. And making the most of the new user events features, that's going to be at 4:45 today. And then bringing other implementing software reduced legacy it's tomorrow at 10:30. And CLA Summit. If you don't have your CLA, get your CLA. I'll see you at the CLA Summit. Thank you very much.